There comes a quiet moment in every life when the noise fades just enough for a deeper question to rise, not shouted, not demanded, but gently whispered from somewhere beneath the surface of the mind. It is the moment when you ask, sometimes with hope and sometimes with exhaustion, why am I here? Why has this been so hard? Why, after all I've done, does the path still feel uncertain? And if you listen carefully, beyond the fear and the question, you may sense something else present with you in that moment, a stillness, a knowing, a presence that has never left you, even when you felt lost. That presence is not alarmed by your doubts. It is not threatened by your confusion. It does not recoil from your weariness. It waits patiently, lovingly, because it has always known something you are only now remembering. You did not come this far by accident, and you will not be abandoned at the threshold of your becoming. You see, the mind is trained to measure progress by external markers, timelines, achievements, recognition, visible outcomes. The ego loves checklists and milestones because they provide the illusion of control. But the soul does not operate on the clock of urgency or the calendar of fear. The soul moves in seasons, in rhythms, in cycles of expansion and contraction that cannot be rushed without breaking something sacred within you. When life slows you down, when doors close, when plans unravel, it is not punishment, it is recalibration. It is the deeper intelligence of life gently redirecting you toward alignment rather than accomplishment, toward truth rather than approval. There is a profound difference between delay and denial, and the ego confuses the two constantly. Delay feels like rejection when you believe your worth is tied to outcomes. But when you understand that your value is inherent, delay becomes preparation. A seed buried in the soil has not been forgotten. It has not failed. It has been placed exactly where it needs to be to grow roots strong enough to support what will eventually rise into the light. And you, in your moments of darkness, of uncertainty, of waiting, are doing the invisible work of becoming rooted in something far more enduring than temporary success. Fear enters when the mind imagines a future without support, without meaning, without guidance. Fear says, what if this is all there is? What if I missed my chance? What if I am not enough? But fear is not a prophet, it is a habit. It is a conditioned response born from identifying with the ego, which believes it must manage everything to survive. The ego does not trust life because it does not trust stillness. It fears surrender because surrender feels like disappearance. Yet the great paradox of spiritual awakening is this: when you let go of the need to control, you do not vanish, you expand. You do not lose yourself, you remember who you truly are. Trusting divine timing does not mean passively waiting or resigning yourself to fate. It means acting from a place of inner alignment rather than outer panic. It means moving when you are guided, resting when you are called to be still, and releasing the belief that constant struggle is proof of worthiness. You were never meant to earn love through exhaustion. You were never meant to justify your existence through suffering. Life is not testing you to see if you are good enough. It is shaping you so that you can recognize your own wholeness. Every challenge you have faced has been an invitation not to become harder, but to become deeper. Pain has a way of stripping away illusions, the illusion that happiness is somewhere else, that peace is conditional, that strength means never feeling afraid. In truth, strength is the willingness to stay present with fear without letting it dictate your choices. Courage is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision to listen to a wiser voice within you, even when doubt is loud. And that wiser voice has been with you through every setback, every loss, every unanswered prayer, quietly guiding you toward growth you could not yet see. When life feels uncertain, faith is often misunderstood as blind optimism or forced positivity, but real faith is far more grounded than that. Faith is not denying reality, it is trusting that reality is larger than your current perception of it. Faith is the calm assurance that even when you cannot trace the path, you are being carried by an intelligence that understands the terrain far better than your anxious thoughts ever could. It is the deep, steady knowing that what is meant for you cannot miss you, and what misses you was never aligned with your soul's truth. You may look back on moments you once labeled as failures and realize they were turning points, moments when life was quietly protecting you from becoming someone you were never meant to be. You may recognize that the endings you resisted were actually beginnings in disguise, clearing space for a more authentic expression of who you are. Nothing has been wasted. No experience has been random. Even your mistakes have been teachers, guiding you away from illusion and toward awareness. Awareness is the doorway to peace, not the awareness of what others expect from you or how you appear in the world, but the awareness of your inner landscape, the thoughts you choose to believe, the stories you tell yourself about who you are, the meanings you assign to events. When you observe your thoughts rather than becoming them, you begin to loosen the grip of fear. You start to see that you are not the anxious voice predicting disaster, not the self-critical commentary replaying the past, not the restless urge to prove yourself. You are the witness of all of it. You are the space in which these thoughts arise and dissolve. From that space, surrender becomes natural rather than forced. Surrender is not giving up on your dreams. It is releasing your attachment to how they must unfold. It is trusting that the same presence that guided you through confusion will guide you through clarity, that the same intelligence that sustained you in hardship will sustain you in abundance. When you surrender, you align yourself with a flow that does not require struggle to function. You move from pushing against life to moving with it. Spiritual growth is rarely glamorous. It often looks like patience when you want answers, compassion when you want justice, forgiveness when you want vindication. But each of these choices softens the ego's grip and opens the heart to greater freedom. Forgiveness, in particular, is not about excusing harm or denying pain. It is about refusing to carry the weight of resentment any longer. There are no justified resentments because resentment always costs the one who holds it far more than the one it is directed toward. When you release resentment, you reclaim your energy. You free yourself from the past and return to the present, where peace is always available. The present moment is not a stepping stone to something better. It is the only place where life is actually happening. When you anchor yourself here, rather than projecting into an imagined future or replaying an unchangeable past, you discover a quiet joy that does not depend on circumstances. You realize that peace is not found by fixing everything, but by accepting what is and responding from awareness rather than fear. In this acceptance, clarity emerges. Purpose reveals itself not as a grand mission to impress the world, but as a simple, profound commitment to live in alignment with truth, love, and presence. You are already enough, not because you have achieved everything you set out to do, but because your worth was never tied to achievement. You are enough because you exist, because you are an expression of the same creative intelligence that moves the stars and opens the flowers. Nothing needs to be added to you to make you complete. The journey is not about becoming worthy. It is about remembering that you always were. When you strengthen your faith, you are not convincing yourself that everything will turn out exactly as you hope. You are trusting that whatever unfolds will serve your growth, your awakening, your return to wholeness. You are choosing to believe that life is happening for you, not to you, even when that truth is difficult to see. And this choice changes everything. It changes how you meet challenges, how you interpret delays, how you relate to uncertainty. It shifts you from resistance to acceptance, from fear to curiosity, from despair to quiet confidence. There is strength still within you, not the brittle strength of constant effort, but the resilient strength of alignment. It is the strength that allows you to pause, to breathe, to listen. It is the strength that knows when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain silent. It is the strength that trusts the process even when the destination is unclear. And this strength grows every time you choose awareness over reaction, surrender over control, love over fear. God did not bring you this far to leave you. Not in the moments when you felt lost, not in the nights when you questioned everything, not now, standing at the edge of a new understanding. What has begun in you is still unfolding. What has been planted is still growing. The plan is not finished, and neither are you. There is a deeper peace waiting for you. Not somewhere in the future, but here, now, in the recognition that you are guided, supported, and profoundly loved. When you trust this, when you rest in this knowing, you stop asking whether you will make it, and you start living from the quiet certainty that you already are exactly where you need to be. And as you rest in that quiet certainty, something subtle begins to shift inside you. The urgency softens. The constant inner negotiation with life relaxes its grip. You no longer feel compelled to demand proof before trusting or clarity before moving forward. Instead, you sense an invitation to participate in life as it is unfolding, rather than attempting to manage it as if it were a problem to be solved. This is where grace enters, not dramatically, not loudly, but like a gentle easing of resistance that allows you to feel supported even when the road ahead is still veiled. You start to notice that guidance rarely arrives as a thunderclap of certainty. More often, it comes as a quiet inclination, a subtle nudge toward peace rather than pressure. The soul does not shout because it does not need to compete with fear. It waits patiently for you to become still enough to hear it. And when you do, you recognize its voice, not by how urgent it sounds, but by how calm it feels. It does not rush you. It reassures you. It does not threaten you with consequences. It invites you into alignment. Alignment is not about perfection. It is about honesty, the willingness to acknowledge what feels true in your body and heart, even when it contradicts expectations. When you honor that inner truth, even in small ways, life responds with an ease that cannot be forced. Doors open without struggle. Conversations soften. Opportunities emerge not because you chased them, but because you were ready to receive them. This readiness has nothing to do with being flawless and everything to do with being present. Presence transforms the way you experience difficulty. Challenges no longer appear as obstacles meant to defeat you, but as teachers revealing where you are, still holding on too tightly. Every moment of frustration points to an attachment asking to be released. Every moment of sorrow highlights a belief ready to be questioned. And every moment of uncertainty invites you to deepen your trust, not in outcomes, but in the intelligence that guides all outcomes. There is a sacred intelligence at work within you that knows how to heal, how to restore balance, how to bring you back into harmony with life. Your body demonstrates this wisdom every day, repairing itself without instruction, maintaining equilibrium without conscious effort. Your spirit carries the same wisdom. When you stop interfering with fear-based thinking, this intelligence moves effortlessly through you, aligning your thoughts, actions, and intentions with a greater good that includes but transcends personal desire. This is why surrender feels like relief rather than loss when it is genuine. You are not handing your life over to something foreign or indifferent. You are returning it to the deeper self that has always known how to live in harmony with the whole. In surrender, the constant internal dialogue of what if and what next quiets. And in that quiet, clarity arises naturally. You see what needs to be done not as a burden, but as a simple next step, free of drama and resistance. The past loosens its hold when you stop using it as evidence against yourself. Every memory, whether joyful or painful, becomes neutral information rather than a defining story. You realize that who you are now is not determined by what happened then, but by how aware you are in this moment. The present is infinitely more powerful than the past because it is alive, it is responsive, it is where choice resides. And every conscious choice you make here reshapes the future without force. As this understanding deepens, faith stops feeling like something you must maintain through effort. It becomes a natural byproduct of awareness. You trust not because everything is predictable, but because you recognize that unpredictability is not chaos, it is creativity. Life is constantly reorganizing itself in response to consciousness, and as your consciousness becomes more aligned with love, compassion, and truth, the patterns you encounter begin to reflect that alignment back to you. You begin to sense that your life has never been a solitary endeavor. Every encounter, every delay, every unexpected turn has been part of a larger choreography designed to awaken you to your interconnectedness. You are not walking alone, even when it feels that way. You are participating in a vast, intelligent unfolding where nothing is isolated and nothing is without meaning. This realization does not inflate the ego, it humbles it. It replaces the need to be special with the joy of belonging. Belonging is the quiet assurance that you are held within something vast and benevolent. It dissolves the fear of being left behind or forgotten. When you feel this belonging, comparison loses its power. You stop measuring your progress against others because you understand that every path is unique, every timing precise. What unfolds for someone else has no bearing on what is meant for you, and what is meant for you cannot be delayed by another's success. In this space of trust, gratitude arises effortlessly, not as a forced exercise, but as a natural response to seeing clearly. You become grateful not only for what pleases you, but for what has shaped you. Gratitude softens the heart and opens it further to guidance. It turns waiting into appreciation, effort into service, and uncertainty into curiosity. From gratitude, joy emerges, not the fleeting excitement of external validation, but the steady contentment of knowing you are aligned with life itself. And so you continue forward, not driven by fear of failure or the need to prove your worth, but guided by an inner compass that grows more reliable the more you listen to it. You move with life rather than against it. You trust the timing not because you understand it, but because you feel supported by it. And in that trust, you discover that the path has always been rising to meet you, carrying you gently, patiently, toward the fullness of who you are becoming. And with that realization, balance begins to reveal itself, not as a rigid state to be achieved, but as a living harmony you learn to feel rather than force. You begin to sense when you are leaning too far into effort and when you are slipping into avoidance. Balance whispers before it shouts. It shows itself as a subtle discomfort when you are out of alignment and as a deep ease when your inner world and outer actions begin to agree with one another. This balance is not moral or judgmental, it is informational. It is life gently informing you where you are standing in relation to truth. You start to understand that growth does not always mean expansion. Sometimes growth means integration. It means allowing what you have already learned to settle into your nervous system, your relationships, your daily choices. Wisdom is not proven by how much you know, but by how peacefully you live what you know. And peace is not the absence of movement, it is movement without inner conflict. When you act from this place, even difficult decisions carry a sense of rightness, as though they belong to you rather than being imposed upon you. There is a moment quiet, almost unremarkable, when you notice that you no longer need life to reassure you constantly. The questions that once demanded urgent answers soften into open curiosities. You trust yourself enough to live inside the question without panicking. This is a sign of maturity, not resignation. It means your faith has moved from the intellect into the body, where it can steady you without explanation. And because of this steadiness, you no longer confuse intensity with meaning. You stop believing that something must be dramatic to be important or painful to be transformative. Some of the most profound shifts happen gently, like a tide turning beneath the surface. You realize that healing often feels ordinary while it is happening, and only later do you recognize how much lighter you have become. This is where fear loses its authority. Not because it disappears, but because you no longer treat it as a decision maker. Fear becomes a signal rather than a command. You listen to it, acknowledge it, and then you choose again from awareness instead of reflex. Each time you do this, confidence grows quietly, without arrogance. It is the confidence of someone who knows they can meet whatever arises because they are no longer fighting themselves. You also begin to sense a deeper rhythm at play in your life, one that does not rush, but also does not stall. You see that what felt like stagnation was often incubation, and what felt like acceleration sometimes required restraint. Timing reveals itself as intelligent rather than random. And when you reflect on your journey, you can see how often you were protected by delays, redirected by disappointments, strengthened by uncertainty. This understanding restores reverence to your experience. You stop treating your life as a problem to fix and start honoring it as a process to be lived. Even the unresolved pieces take on a sacred quality. You no longer demand that everything makes sense before you allow yourself to feel grateful. Gratitude arises now from participation, from being awake to the privilege of experiencing this moment exactly as it is. And in this awareness, you feel something deeply reassuring. You are not late to your life. Nothing essential has been missed. The path has curved where it needed to curve. You have arrived at this moment with precisely the insight required to be here. The strength you were searching for in the future has been quietly forming within you all along. So you continue, not with blind hope, not with forced certainty, but with a grounded openness that allows life to meet you where you are. You trust the next step without needing to see the entire staircase. You honor the pauses as much as the progress. And you rest in the knowing that the same presence that carried you through confusion is guiding you now with equal care. This is the balance you were seeking: effort and ease, faith and action, surrender and responsibility, all moving together in quiet cooperation. And from this balance, a deeper peace emerges, one that does not depend on conditions, one that cannot be taken from you, because it comes from remembering the truth that has been with you every step of the way. And now, as the journey gently settles into itself, there is nothing left to chase and nothing left to resolve. What remains is a quiet recognition, like coming home after a long walk and realizing the house was never locked. You see that life has not been withholding answers from you, it has been inviting you into a deeper way of listening. The certainty you once sought in signs and outcomes has matured into a softer, steadier, knowing the kind that does not announce itself, but steadies you from within. You begin to feel gratitude not as a response to success, but as a state of being. Gratitude for the breath that arrives without effort. Gratitude for the heart that keeps beating faithfully, without asking for permission. Gratitude for the unseen hands that have guided you through moments you thought you would not survive. This gratitude does not cling to conditions. It flows freely, reminding you that life itself is the gift unfolding moment by moment through you. In this space, you no longer ask whether you are supported. You feel it. You sense it in the quiet strength that rises when you face uncertainty without collapsing. You sense it in the compassion that replaces judgment, in the patience that replaces urgency, in the peace that replaces the need to control. You recognize that the divine was never outside you, waiting to approve your progress. It has always been expressing itself as you through your courage, your tenderness, your willingness to keep going, even when the way was unclear. And so the story softens. The narrative of struggle loosens its grip. You stop defining yourself by what you have endured or what you still lack. You begin to live from a deeper identity, not as someone trying to get somewhere, but as someone learning to be fully present where they are. In this presence, you discover that peace is not a destination. It is a relationship with the moment you are in. Nothing needs to be added to make this moment complete. Nothing needs to be taken away to make you worthy of peace. You are already standing in the current of life, already carried by an intelligence that knows exactly where you are and why you are here. The next step will reveal itself when it is time, just as every step before it did. There is no rush. There is no abandonment. There is only unfolding. So let yourself rest in this truth. Let it settle into your bones, into your breath, into the quiet spaces between your thoughts. God did not bring you this far to leave you. This far is not the end. It is the remembering. The remembering that you are guided. The remembering that you are enough. The remembering that you are never alone in this journey. And as you move forward gently, consciously, awake, may you carry this knowing with you like a steady light. Not blinding, not demanding, just present. A light that reminds you in every season and every step that life is not happening against you. It is happening through you, and you are exactly where you are meant to be. There comes a moment in every life when the noise grows so loud that it begins to drown out the only voice that has ever truly guided you. The opinions, the expectations, the endless commentary of the world press in on your mind until you forget what it feels like to rest inside your own being. And in that moment, the soul whispers, not in force, not in drama, but in quiet certainty. Focus on God, humble yourself, and stay silent. Not silent as an act of fear or withdrawal, but silent as an act of trust. Silent as a return. Silent as remembrance. You see, silence is not emptiness. Silence is presence. It is the space where the divine has always been waiting for you to stop arguing with life and start listening to it. When you quiet the constant narration of the ego, when you step away from the need to explain, defend, impress, or control, something ancient and intelligent begins to rise within you. This is not a new force entering your life. It is the original intelligence that has always been there, patiently observing, calmly guiding, never imposing. God does not shout over your thoughts. God waits for you to soften enough to hear. Humility is the doorway. Not the humility that shrinks you or convinces you that you are unworthy, but the humility that releases the illusion that you were ever meant to run the universe on your own. True humility is simply alignment with reality. It is the understanding that there is an order to life far greater than your personal preferences, fears, or timelines. When you humble yourself, you are not lowering your value, you are expanding your access. You are stepping out of the narrow corridor of the ego and into the vast intelligence that moves planets, seasons, and souls with effortless precision. The ego believes it must constantly speak, react, and assert itself in order to survive. It fears silence because silence reveals the truth, that you are not the voice in your head, you are the awareness listening to it. And awareness does not need to shout. Awareness does not need approval. Awareness does not need to be right. Awareness simply is. When you stay silent, you are not retreating from power, you are returning to it. You are allowing the deeper wisdom within you to take the lead. There is a sacred intelligence that flows through all of life, and it has never lost your address. It knows where you are, what you need, and when the next step will appear. But this intelligence cannot be accessed through force. It cannot be commanded by anxiety or coerced by fear. It responds to trust. It responds to surrender. It responds when you stop gripping life with clenched fists and begin opening your hands in faith. Faith, in its truest sense, is not blind belief. It is inner knowing. It is the quiet confidence that life is not happening to you, but through you and for you. Faith is what remains when the ego runs out of explanations. It is what carries you when the path ahead is not yet visible. And it is strengthened not by noise, but by stillness. When you focus on God, you are not turning away from the world. You are seeing it clearly for the first time. You begin to recognize that much of what you once fought against was never an enemy at all, but a teacher. The delays, the disappointments, the unanswered questions, they were not punishments. They were invitations to trust at a deeper level. Invitations to let go of the need to manage outcomes and instead align with wisdom. Staying silent does not mean suppressing your truth. It means discerning when your words are guided by love and when they are driven by fear. Silence allows you to respond rather than react. It gives you the clarity to see that not every battle requires your participation and not every opinion deserves your energy. When you are anchored in God, you no longer feel compelled to prove your worth. You know it. And that knowing is unshakable. Anxiety thrives on the illusion that you are alone in managing life. It feeds on the belief that everything depends on your effort, your vigilance, your constant mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios. But the moment you step back and say, I trust the intelligence that created me to guide me, anxiety begins to loosen its grip. You rise above confusion, not by solving every problem, but by remembering who is truly in charge. The universe does not rush, and yet everything is accomplished. The trees do not strain to grow. The stars do not worry about alignment. There is a rhythm to existence that is inherently harmonious, and when you align with it, life begins to flow with less resistance. Trusting this flow does not mean passivity. It means inspired action, action that arises from inner clarity rather than outer pressure. When you stop forcing life, something remarkable happens. Opportunities appear without strain, answers arrive without demand. You find yourself guided toward the right conversations, the right decisions, the right moments, not because you controlled them, but because you allowed them. This is the paradox of surrender. When you release control, you gain alignment. When you let go of fear, you gain direction. Humility allows you to be taught by life instead of arguing with it. Silence allows you to hear what has been trying to reach you all along. And focus on God reminds you that you are never separate from the source that animates you. The divine is not distant or reserved for special moments. It is present in every breath, every pause, every quiet realization that you are supported in ways you cannot always see. The soul always knows. It has a memory far older than your current circumstances. It remembers wholeness even when the mind is fragmented. And when you give the soul space through silence, humility, and trust, it gently guides you back to yourself. Not the self defined by roles, achievements, or past mistakes, but the self that exists beyond all of that. The self that is enough, always has been, always will be. There are no justified resentments because resentment assumes that life has made a mistake. Forgiveness is not about condoning behavior. It is about releasing the belief that carrying pain gives you power. It does not. It drains you. When you forgive, you free yourself from the weight of the past and make room for clarity in the present. And clarity is the language of God. Living in the now is not a spiritual slogan. It is a spiritual discipline. It is the practice of meeting life as it is without overlaying it with regret or fear. The present moment is where guidance exists. It is where peace resides. It is where the divine can be felt most clearly. When you stay silent, you naturally return to now. The mind slows. The heart opens. And you remember that this moment, just as it is enough. You are a divine being having a human experience, not the other way around. And the more you identify with this truth, the less power the ego has over you. Pride dissolves not through self-criticism, but through awareness. You see that the need to be superior, to be right, to be noticed, was never about confidence. It was about forgetting your connection to God. When you remember that connection, humility becomes natural, silence becomes comforting, trust becomes logical. Everything changes when you begin trusting God instead of forcing life. The struggle softens, The urgency fades. You find yourself moving with life rather than against it. And in that movement, there is grace, there is ease. There's a quiet joy that does not depend on circumstances. Silence is not weakness, it is spiritual strength. It is the strength to listen, to observe, to wait without fear. Humility is not limitation, it is divine access. It opens you to guidance that cannot reach a mind crowded with ego. And faith is not blind, it is the deepest form of knowing. It is the recognition that the same intelligence that beats your heart knows exactly how to guide your life. So focus on God. Humble yourself before the mystery of existence. Stay silent long enough to hear the truth that has always lived within you. Trust the flow that has carried you this far. Let go of control and fear. Rise above anxiety and confusion. And remember, you were never meant to do this alone. You were meant to align, to listen, and to allow. When you do, everything changes, not because the world suddenly becomes perfect, but because you finally remember who you are within it. And as you remain in this softened state of awareness, something even more subtle begins to unfold. You start to notice that life has been speaking to you all along, not through dramatic signs or thunderous revelations, but through gentle nudges, quiet intuitions, and repeated invitations to return to love. The universe does not compete for your attention, it cooperates with your willingness. When you slow down enough to feel rather than think your way through existence, guidance becomes less of an event and more of a constant presence. There is a wisdom that moves beneath the surface of your daily experiences, arranging encounters, delays, and openings with a precision that the rational mind could never orchestrate. You may call it God, source, higher intelligence, or simply love, but its signature is always the same. It carries no urgency, no condemnation, no fear. It does not rush you or shame you into growth. It waits, knowing that what is real cannot be threatened and what is false does not need defending. When you release the need to announce your journey, to justify your choices, or to seek validation for your faith, your inner life becomes richer and more stable. Silence protects what is sacred. It allows your connection with God to mature without interference, like a seed growing underground, unseen but inevitable. Not everything meant to transform you needs to be explained to others. Some truths are meant to be lived quietly until they become embodied wisdom. And in this quiet embodiment, you begin to recognize a profound shift. You are no longer driven by the need to fix yourself. The endless self-improvement project gives way to self-remembrance. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start resting in the awareness nothing essential has ever been missing. From this space, healing unfolds naturally, not as a dramatic breakthrough, but as a gentle return to wholeness, moment by moment. You notice how compassion begins to replace judgment, especially toward yourself. Where you once pushed, you now allow. Where you once resisted, you now soften. This is not resignation, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that growth does not require force, only alignment. The flower does not strain to bloom, it simply turns toward the light. And so do you, when you stop wrestling with your own becoming. The more you trust this process, the less you fear uncertainty. You realize that not knowing is not a flaw in the design, it is part of the invitation. Uncertainty keeps you present. It keeps you listening. It keeps you humble enough to be guided rather than driven. The ego craves certainty because it fears disappearance. The soul welcomes mystery because it knows it is eternal. As this awareness deepens, even challenges take on a different quality. They no longer arrive as evidence of failure, but as signals for refinement. Life begins to feel less like a series of obstacles and more like a curriculum designed specifically for your awakening. Nothing is wasted, nothing is random. Every experience carries within it the potential to return you to love if you meet it without resistance. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to live from a quieter center. Your actions become simpler, more intentional. Your words carry less urgency and more truth. You discover that peace is not something you chase, but something you uncover when you stop running from yourself. In this space, joy arises without reason, gratitude flows without effort, and trust becomes your natural posture toward life. This is the strength that comes from humility. This is the clarity born of silence. This is the freedom that emerges when you focus on God rather than the noise of the world. You are not withdrawing from life, you are finally meeting it without the armor of fear. And in doing so, you allow the deepest intelligence in the universe to move through you gently, wisely, and always in the direction of love. Stay here, not as an escape, but as a homecoming. Let each breath remind you that you are held, guided, and infinitely supported. You do not need to force the next step. You only need to remain available to it. Life knows how to reach you when you are willing to be still. And in that stillness, you will find that everything you have been seeking has been patiently waiting within you all along. And from this place of inner availability, you may begin to sense something quietly astonishing, that the peace you once believed was reserved for some future moment has already arrived. It has been here beneath the striving, beneath the questions, beneath the endless effort to become something more. Peace does not enter your life when conditions improve. It reveals itself when resistance dissolves. It is not granted as a reward. It is recognized as your natural state. You start to understand that much of what you once called effort was actually fear in disguise. The need to hurry, to push, to secure outcomes before they slip away, all of it rooted in the belief that life is fragile and must be managed. But life is not fragile. It is intelligent, and when you stop interfering with that intelligence, when you stop telling the river how to flow, it carries you with a grace that feels almost miraculous, though it has always been the way. There is a quiet courage that grows inside you now. Not the courage to conquer or dominate, but the courage to trust without guarantees, to move forward without demanding proof, to rest in faith even when the path curves out of sight. This courage does not shout. It does not announce itself. It simply steadies you. It allows you to remain open where you once closed, calm where you once panicked, patient where you once grasped, and you begin to notice how life responds to this shift. Not always immediately, not always in dramatic ways, but consistently. Conversations soften, opportunities align. Even when circumstances remain challenging, your relationship to them changes. You are no longer at war with what is. You meet it with presence. And presence transforms experience more deeply than control ever could. You may still feel emotions, sadness, uncertainty, longing, but they move through you rather than defining you. You no longer cling to them as identities. You watch them arise, crest, and pass like weather across a vast sky. And you begin to recognize yourself not as the storm, but as the sky itself. Spacious, unthreatened, aware. This awareness carries with it a profound kindness toward yourself first and then outward. You stop measuring your worth by productivity or approval. You stop comparing your journey to anyone else's. Comparison fades when you realize that life is not a competition but an expression. Each soul unfolds in its own timing according to its own design. There is no need to rush what is already guided. In this gentler rhythm, gratitude becomes less of a practice and more of a perception. You notice beauty in ordinary moments. You feel reverence in simplicity. A quiet cup of tea, a deep breath, a shared smile, these become sacred not because you label them so, but because you are fully present to them, and presence reveals the holy in the ordinary. You begin to see that silence is not something you enter only in meditation or prayer. It becomes a way of moving through the world, a listening quality, a softness behind your words. Even when you speak, there is space. Even when you act, there is stillness underneath. This is not withdrawal from life. It is intimacy with it. And in this intimacy, fear loses its authority. It may still visit, but it no longer governs. You recognize it as a signal to return inward, to reconnect, to remember. Fear cannot survive sustained awareness. It dissolves when met with understanding rather than resistance. You do not fight it away. You outgrow it. As trust deepens, control loosens naturally. You stop trying to orchestrate every detail of your existence. You act when inspired, rest when guided, speak when necessary, and remain silent when wisdom calls for quiet. Life becomes less about achievement and more about alignment, less about effort and more about allowing. And perhaps the most profound realization of all begins to dawn, that you have never been separate from God. The sense of distance was created by thought, sustained by fear, and dissolved by awareness. The moment you stop searching outward for what has always lived within you, the seeking ends. And in its place, there is a gentle, abiding knowing you are guided, you are loved, and you are exactly where you need to be. So continue to walk gently. Continue to listen deeply. Continue to trust what is unfolding, even when it does not make immediate sense. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are remembering. And every moment of humility, every pause of silence, every act of trust brings you closer, not to something new, but to the truth of who you have always been. And as this remembering deepens, you begin to sense a gentle recalibration taking place within you, as though an inner compass long obscured is quietly finding true north again. You are no longer measuring your life by how loud it appears from the outside, but by how aligned it feels on the inside. The old impulses to impress, to rush, to prove, begin to lose their urgency, not because you have suppressed them, but because they no longer promise what you once believed they could deliver. You notice how the need to be seen gives way to the desire to be real. Authenticity starts to matter more than approval. Truth feels more nourishing than applause. And this shift is subtle, almost tender, yet it transforms everything. You move through conversations with less armor. You listen more than you speak. You sense when words would clarify and when silence would heal. And in this discernment, wisdom quietly takes root. Life begins to feel less like a puzzle to be solved and more like a mystery to be trusted. You stop demanding that every experience make immediate sense. You allow questions to remain open without anxiety. And in doing so, you discover that clarity often arrives not through analysis, but through patience. Understanding ripens in its own time, and when it does, it arrives whole, without strain. There is a profound relief in realizing that you do not need to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. The belief that everything depends on you begins to loosen, and with it, the tension that once lived in your body softens, your breath deepens, your nervous system settles. You feel supported by something far more stable than your own effort. And this support does not make you passive, it makes you present. From this presence, inspired action arises naturally. You find yourself doing what needs to be done without the heaviness of obligation. Service replaces struggle. Contribution replaces competition. You act not to secure your worth, but to express it. And because your actions are no longer fueled by fear, they carry a different energy, calmer, clearer, more effective. You may notice that some relationships shift during this time, not through conflict, but through resonance. When you change your frequency, what no longer aligns gently falls away, and what is true finds you with ease. There is no need to force connections or cling to dynamics that have run their course. Trust that what remains is what supports your becoming. And when moments of doubt arise, as they inevitably will, you meet them differently now. You do not spiral into self-judgment or rush to escape discomfort. You pause, you breathe, you remember. Doubt becomes a doorway rather than a dead end, inviting you back into trust, back into humility, back into listening. This is how faith matures, not as certainty about outcomes, but as steadiness within uncertainty. You learn to rest in the unseen, to walk forward without needing the entire path illuminated, to trust that each step will reveal itself precisely when it is needed. And in this trust, you feel a companionship with life itself, as though you are being quietly escorted rather than left to wander alone. Gradually, the inner dialogue softens even further. The harshness fades. The criticism loses its edge. You speak to yourself with the same patience you would offer a dear friend, and this kindness becomes a powerful healing force. The body responds. The heart opens. Old wounds begin to release their grip, not because you forced them to heal, but because you finally created the conditions for healing to occur. You realize then that humility is not about thinking less of yourself, it is about thinking of yourself less often. It is about becoming so anchored in something greater that the constant self-referencing mind can finally rest. And in that rest, there is freedom. Freedom from the need to control. Freedom from the need to know. Freedom to simply be. The quiet you have cultivated now moves with you everywhere. It is present in motion as much as in stillness. It does not disappear when life becomes busy or challenging. It remains as an undercurrent, steady and reassuring. You know where to return when the world feels overwhelming. You know how to listen again. And so you continue, not with force, but with faith. Not with pride, but with humility. Not with noise, but with a deep, abiding silence. that carries wisdom in every breath. You are no longer seeking alignment, you are living it. And as you do, life meets you with the same gentleness, the same intelligence, the same quiet love that has always been guiding you home.